Welcome back to Three Men and a Mystery. I'm one of the three men, John Lorden.
And this is Mike Morford.
And I'm Gray Hughes.
Well, just wanted to take a moment and say welcome back, boys. Nice to be working with you again. And welcome back, all of you listeners out there. We've got a brand new case we're looking into this season. Today, we are starting season 2. We're calling this season Silenced, the Death of Elisa Gomez. We're calling it Silenced because Elisa was an artist working on her final college project at Minneapolis College of Art and Design. What she was working on was painting a self-portrait, but in this self-portrait, her mouth is covered in duct tape and the word silenced is written on the duct tape. There have been several high-profile cases where police have initially thought that it might be a suicide. Some of these cases turn out to be actually staged homicides. Of course, the Culpable podcast has been featuring the case of Christian Andriacchio, which I also covered on my YouTube channel, and I worked on an interactive live private investigator event at CrimeCon based on that case as well. There's just a large sense of injustice when the puzzle pieces point to more than the conclusion reached by the official investigators. Do you guys have cases like this that stick with you?
Yeah, I actually have a case that really reminds me of this, the Jonathan Cruz case. It's another case that Sheila Wysocki works on, and this is one that I worked on professionally outside of YouTube on. And I think you covered, John, you covered this case on your channel. And this is a case where an individual named Jonathan Cruz was claimed to have committed suicide by his girlfriend, Brenda, but the gunshot angle and a lot of the other circumstances surrounding the case don't add up to suicide.
Yeah, including the fact that she was in the room at the time
Right.
of the gunshot.
Exactly.
Yeah. What about you, Morph?
The case that comes to my mind is the 1989 case of Cindy James out of Vancouver, Canada. Cindy was a 44-year-old nurse. She was found dead with her hands tied behind her back and actually hogtied to her feet. And a toxicology report later revealed the presence of morphine in her system that was more than 10 times the lethal amount. And in that case, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police concluded Cindy committed suicide.
Yeah. And that never got overturned, right?
Now it still stood there, and there's a whole backstory. Cindy had lots of claims over many years that she was being tormented and stalked and harassed by some unknown person or persons, and police began to believe that she had some mental illness and was making it all up. So that it's a little bit of a different backstory, but the facts at the end are very, very puzzling, and it makes it hard to just accept that the case was a clear case of suicide.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're dealing with here. The case we're covering this season is exactly like those cases in that regard. It's very hard to accept it when you actually look at all the information that's available. So let's get into it. Tuesday, October 11th, 2016, in Minneapolis, Minnesota. First responders show up on a bright, sunny fall morning to a cute cottage home with a wooden picket fence. But as they get closer, they see that the gate for the fence has been shattered to pieces, and the wood frame along the top of the gate is broken in two. They head up the walkway, and an outdoor lighting fixture has somehow been pulled out of the wall and is laying on the ground. A cell phone would later be found in the bushes 2 houses down. There was clearly some sort of big dispute outside. However, several of those details would not wind up in the responding officers' reports. Thankfully, we've seen body cam footage, and that's where we're getting some of these details as well as additional pictures that have been provided to us. The night before, a disturbance call was phoned in by neighbors stating that they heard a man and a woman yelling at each other outside. By the time police drove by, the disturbance had ended. They drove by without investigating further. They didn't know they'd be back the following morning to conduct a death investigation. A narrow staircase leads down to the basement, which had been converted to a bedroom. A bathroom door is to the right, and hanging from a beam is a purple scarf. Laying face down below the scarf is the body of 47-year-old Elisa Ann Gomez. She's wearing a sweater over a shirt, but only panties. Her body is draped over a short step stool, usually used for her dogs to get up on her bed. The dogs are laying next to Elisa and present the first challenge to the first responders.
Whoa, okay. We have some big dogs here.
Huh?
No, back upstairs, guys. Ma'am, there's a big dog back there. I'm not sure you want to go.
A fire department captain carefully approaches and works his way around the dogs to Elisa's head. The staircase is jammed with responding personnel in a holding pattern. It takes only a few moments for them to realize it's too late.
There we got riggers.
Just shine your light over here for me.
Yep.
Yep, she's gone. Okay.
And you can cancel EMS.
This is from the 21. This is the DOA.
Bus 33, you're breaking up. I didn't copy the last part.
Cancel ambulance.
It seems that years of experience just don't make these moments any easier. It literally takes only a few seconds before the questions start.
So, what's the story? Did they find her hanging here?
Yeah, we haven't gotten that. We just got here just so you guys. So he's going upstairs now.
Did you guys get the remarks? Apparently they found her and cut her down.
But the first responders have yet to learn one of the most difficult aspects to understand about Elisa's death. Would a new bride do this to herself on her wedding day? Less than 24 hours prior, Elisa married a man named Bradley Alexander. He lived in the house for a little over a month. They also had a roommate named Sharon Vestal. The three of them were out at a bar celebrating Elisa's marriage to Brad just a few hours before she reportedly ended her own life. Elisa's family has been in contact with me for several months. Her mother, Judy Hunt, is searching for the truth. She's provided us with a lot of information, including recordings, pictures, and reports released to the family by the Minneapolis Police Department Records Office. She has told us this case is closed and considered a suicide by the police department. However, on Elisa's death certificate, the medical examiner, Lauren Wilson Jackson, has listed the manner of death as could not be determined. In conversations with the family, Emmy Jackson has been clear that he cannot rule out the possibility of a homicide.
And we're going to be calling on the best experts we can find to evaluate this information and help bring us all to a better understanding of just what happened here.
Yeah, and we will analyze the physical evidence and try to determine if it was even possible for Elisa to have done this to herself in that basement.
We're going to learn about Elisa while honoring her memory. This is a woman who was a mother, artist, animal lover, and beloved family member. We will also look into the history of Bradley Alexander to see if his past includes anything that may change our perspective on the official status of this case. All of that coming up on this season of Three Men and a Mystery.
And we'll be right back after this break.
A lot of us struggle with finding happiness, dealing with tough life issues, and so much more. But you don't have to struggle alone, and you don't even have to leave your home to get the help you need, thanks to BetterHelp Online Counseling.
BetterHelp is available on desktop or mobile for both Android or iOS. You can speak to a counselor via text, chat, phone, or video.
Find secure, convenient, professional help that's affordable with BetterHelp.
BetterHelp isn't a crisis line, but you can find licensed professional counselors that you can speak to from the comfort of your own home.
Three Men and a Mystery listeners get 10% off your first month with discount code 3MEN. So why not get started today? Go to betterhelp.com/3men. Financial aid is available to those who qualify. Simply fill out a questionnaire to help them assess your needs and get matched with a counselor you'll love. That's betterhelp.com/3men. Find help to break through those personal obstacles with BetterHelp. Welcome back, and please keep in mind that our sponsors are helping us raise funds that will go towards investigating this case further and honoring the life of Elisa Gomez, so please show them the same support that they're showing us. Officer Willis was one of the first to arrive on scene. Let's learn what he observed by reviewing some excerpts directly from his official report. I was working Mark's Squad 320A when I was dispatched to a possible DOA by suicide. Upon arrival, I saw Witness 1, Sharon Vestal, and Witness 2, Bradley Alexander, out front by the porch front door. Both parties were crying and visibly shaken. Alexander came outside and dropped down to his knees with his hands over his face and continued crying as Vestal showed us into the house where victim 1, Elisa Gomez, was in the basement. EMS was right behind us and was able to get to the body and declare her DOA. I began getting information from Vestal. I gathered all her biographical information from her and learned that she lived here with her 2 daughters as a renter from Gomez. Vestal told me that Gomez and Alexander had just gotten married yesterday, 10/10/16, at the Edina courthouse. She told me that all 3 of them went to the Cedar Inn bar at 42nd and Cedar and were drinking heavily until around 11:30 to 12 last night. Vestal said they then all came back and continued to drink heavy, at which point Gomez and Alexander began to verbally argue and be nasty to each other. I asked Vestal if this was normal behavior, and she said that it was. Vestal said that Alexander had a bad drinking problem and that he and Gomez would often verbally argue and be mean to each other, but that she never saw it get physical. Vestal told me that she remembered Gomez leaving at some point from the main floor living room and that she and Alexander continued to drink. Vestal said she does not remember going to bed, but she got up about 7 a.m. to help her daughter go to the bathroom, and she saw Alexander sleeping on the main floor living room couch. Vestal said she got up again around 7:45 a.m. and got her older daughter off to school with her sister and then went back to bed. Vestal said that around 8:30, Alexander came banging on her door and told her that he needed her downstairs right now by yourself. Vestal said Alexander was crying and that he led her downstairs where she saw Gomez hanging from a rafter by a pink scarf. Vestal said Alexander freaked out and ran back upstairs. Vestal said she began crying and yelling at Gomez as she grabbed a clippers to cut her down from the rafter. Vestal said that when she cut Gomez down, the body fell straight down and she knew she was dead. Vestal said she ran back upstairs and called 911 as Alexander continued to cry and talk to himself, but she could not hear what he was saying. At this point, I went and spoke to Alexander to get his biographical information. Alexander also told me that he and Gomez had been a couple for 2 months and had just gotten married yesterday at the Edina courthouse. So that's the responding officer. What do you guys think about what he's saying here?
There's a lot to take in, and I'm imagining him going onto the scene. He's got multiple people that were in multiple rooms that he's got to sort through. There was alcohol involved, so he's got a pretty big project to start this case off with upon arrival.
Definitely.
And I was interested to hear that. Alexander was actually sleeping somewhere else. I mean, isn't this their wedding night?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, he's sleeping upstairs, really, and then he does. It does sound like the officer observed that he was upset. So that's one thing, quote in his favor, but that's what you would also pretend to do to try to trick people into thinking that you were really upset.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because we have the body cam footage of him showing up on the scene, and what he describes in his written report is not an exact match for what you see in the body cam footage. Bradley doesn't cover his face in the body cam footage. It's been redacted, so his face is blurred. I can't really see the expression on his face, but he doesn't cover his face. He doesn't really fall to his knees. He steps outside and he kind of crouches down to the ground. But we're going to have other information we review where we can get a pretty good sense of how Brad's responding to this. I'm really interested in the fact that Cherone's account, at least to this officer, doesn't include anything about Elisa and Bradley's argument outside. That is just completely missing from this narrative. And we're going to see that certainly happened as we continue with information from Officer Dean. So Officer Dean was also at the scene. He heard some interesting news from a neighbor. This is from his report. While I was standing outside of the house with one of the residents of the house, a lady that lives a few houses north of the incident came up to me and told me that they heard some noises last night. I then told her I would come and talk to her. I then went and talked to the neighbor. Once inside the house, I spoke with several other people who all told me that last night, about 2:30 or 3 a.m., they heard two people, a male and a female, arguing. Witness A told me that she was sleeping on the main floor next to a window when she heard some yelling and arguing. She then got up and went and woke up her parents. They told me that after their daughter woke them up, they came to the main floor and heard a male and a female arguing and yelling. They could not hear what was being said, but they did hear a lot of MF words, and the male was very angry. The mother told me that she heard a cell phone, but did not find one outside of her window. It should be noted that the mother called 911 for the noise. After talking to the family, I went outside and found the cell phone in the yard. This cell phone was picked up by car 21. So clearly we have a disturbance that happened here. This is about 2 houses away from where Elisa was living. According to this information, kind of sounds like maybe they weren't just arguing in the front yard, but maybe they had actually moved down close to where that house was. We don't know how, but it is Bradley's phone that winds up in bushes by that house, two houses down. So a lot of strange information. There's other things that we learned from the police reports as well. Hennepin County Medical Examiner personnel arrived and took custody of the victim. The domestic dispute 911 call from the neighbors happened at 2:19 a.m. Police arrived at the scene over 30 minutes later at 2:51, and they declared it GOA, or gone on arrival, and they left a few minutes after that. From what I understand, I don't think they even checked in with the neighbors. I don't think they checked in at Elisa's house. And I'm kind of surprised, honestly, for a 30-minute response time at 2 o'clock in the morning to a domestic dispute call. It seems a little long.
What time do they put the time of death at?
I don't know that we have really solid information on that, but with this case, we're literally dealing with hundreds of pages of information. So we're going to keep digging into it. We might be able to determine that. We're planning an episode where we're going to get into the autopsy report, maybe bring on a forensic pathologist to help us with the understanding on that. So I'm hoping we'll find some better information that might drill in the time.
I mean, she had rigor, right? So that means it had to be quite a bit prior to her being found.
Yeah. Also, it's stated that Sharon used a fingernail clipper to cut Elisa down, and that she fell face first to the ground. It's kind of an interesting device for cutting someone down, and we've seen photos of the scarf. We've been poring over many photos with this case. The scarf is intact. There is a few sections where it looks like it might have been cut by something, but it's not like any piece of the scarf has been cut off. So it really raises some interesting questions about how exactly a fingernail clipper helps you untie a knot like that. Investigators did not see anything that appeared to contradict the initial story reported. There were no obvious signs of any struggle in the area of the body. No defensive wounds were readily visible on Gomez. They did not see any injuries to Alexander that indicated that he was involved in a struggle with Gomez. The scarf had minor cuts to it, but appeared to be generally intact. There was a section of black hair wrapped on the scarf believed to be from Gomez. In our pre-production meetings, we've been looking at many pictures of that clump of hair. It's very hard to understand what that's about. We're going to go ahead and bring up a picture of it right now for the YouTube audience. Gray, what do you think about this clump of hair that's wrapped around the bottom and in that knot on the bottom of the scarf?
It's just, it's really bizarre. I'm wondering though, maybe she clipped her hair and that's what, I mean, I don't know how the knot got undone with the clippers, and I don't know why there's this clump of hair in the scarf at all. I cannot figure that out at all, just looking at it.
Yeah, and especially the way it looks like the hair, it looks like the hair is tied in a knot at the bottom of the scarf. It's just kind of a bizarre thing. I can't really imagine how that hair would wind up in that knot.
Right, I mean, it actually looks like they literally took, I mean, it looks like her hair was tied in a knot and then tightened around the scarf.
Yeah.
It's strange.
And I think to our podcast listeners that can't see the actual photo, it might be a little bit hard to figure out what we're talking about. But I think of when my wife or my daughter uses like a hair scrunchie, and they take it out it somehow has all their hair twisted around it.
Yeah.
And this is sort of how it looks in the photo, is that hair is completely twisted around the pieces of scarf. So how that managed to get twisted around like that is pretty puzzling.
Yeah. And it's what's more interesting is it's not in kind of a haphazard way. It looks like there's a very clear and clean knot in it. Like it literally looks like someone grabbed a bunch of her hair, walked over to the scarf, put it around the scarf, and tied it in a knot and cinched the bottom of the scarf. It's strange because we don't have great detail in terms of how the scarf was on Elisa. And I'm trying to think if there was some mechanism about the way the knot was in the scarf, and if it was clinging to her hair, that when the knot was released and pulled through, if it kind of, you know, put her hair into motion to make another knot somehow. But my brain just, I can't figure out how that knot comes out that way.
I mean, I guess it's possible that like when she was tying, or whoever tied the knot, her hair was sort of intertwined with the actual scarf itself, and then it was tightened and it kind of got caught up in that. But then what's strange is after the scarf is cut, it's straight down, and then there's this big sort of a loop of hair still sitting on the scarf.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that wasn't cut, right? That wasn't the part that was cut. Her hair wasn't cut. So why is it there? You know?
Right. And the other thing is her hair looks like most of it is up on top of her head. Like it's been cinched on top of her head. So it's already kind of strange. Yeah.
I think that photo is definitely one thing we're going to want to show some of the experts and ask their opinions of how that hair could get like that.
Yeah. And quite honestly, someone that could really help with the understanding of all of this is Sharon. I'm curious about the dynamic that's going on in this house at the time where this discovery is made. I'm curious why Sharon is the one that has to cut down Elisa. I'm curious what made that decision happen. Was this a rescue effort at that point? I mean, if you knew that she had passed away already and you knew you were going to be having investigators come to the house, why would you even touch anything? But I understand that this is a traumatic experience, and, you know, people don't always do exactly what you would expect a clear, level-minded person to do. But I really believe that Sharon could shed some big light on this case. She makes some interesting comments that we're going to get to as we go through this season. And I think there's a chance that she might have more information that could help us and help the family really come to a better understanding of all this. Let me just be clear. I'm not professing to know one way or the other if this is a foul play situation. And there's a lot of things that you look into with this case where it looks like there is a possibility that Elisa could have taken her own life. But there's a lot of other things that you look at that make you kind of tilt the other direction. It's been something I've been looking into for months, and I still feel like I'm walking on a tightrope basically the whole time I'm analyzing this case. It's not clear, and I think Sharon could really help clear that up. Morph, have we tried to make contact with Sharon yet?
Yeah, I've tried to reach out to her using a couple different methods, and so far I haven't gotten a response, but we're going to stick at it and see if we can somehow get a confirmed response from her, and maybe we can get her on to talk to her, or at least, even if not on the air, maybe we can ask her some questions.
Yeah, and let me just put a personal appeal out with this. Sharon, please help us understand this better. Please help Elisa's family understand this better. There are a few questions. I know this is a traumatic experience. I know this isn't a day that you want to go back to time and time again. We'll be as brief as we can about it. We'll be as direct as we can about it. We're not looking to exploit you in any way. There is key information that you have that can help us understand this better, and we need your help. And I really hope that you'll reach out to us and help us with that. Speaking of Sharon, so she called her aunt after the discovery of Elisa to come pick up her other daughter. And her aunt says when she arrived, there was no police there. So once again, I just have this question of, had they already called 911 and we're just looking at some kind of very long response time for Minneapolis PD to show up with? It's weird because they show up with emergency services with them. So it seems like they were treating it like there was a possibility that there could have been a life-saving effort going on. But the aunt shows up and says that she didn't see any emergency responders there yet.
I think that the time of the actual 911 call and the time of established time of death might give some kind of timeline information and detail that we can work off of maybe.
Yeah, and we are going to try to put a solid timeline together on this. Also about the events kind of going on that day in particular. Leading up to the wedding, what happened after the wedding, where did they go? We've got some security camera footage from the Cedar Inn. We're going to analyze that, share that with you guys in a future episode as well. There's a lot. We're barely scratching the surface when it comes to the material that we're presenting here. So the following items were collected and brought to the crime lab unit. There was a black Apple iPhone with a case found on the kitchen counter. I know that was Elisa's phone that was found on the kitchen counter. There was a black Samsung Galaxy Note 3 with the case that was found in the neighbor's bushes. That is Bradley's cell phone. They took DNA swabs from Bradley and Sharon. Both Bradley and Sharon agreed to that, no problem. They did collect nail clippings, pulled head hair, an SAE or a sexual assault kit, all from Elisa. Her jacket, underwear, bra, hair binder, shirt, sweatshirt, her laptop, purse, cell phone, wallet, numerous miscellaneous papers that were around the house, notebooks and journals. They took all of that. Pretty substantial amount that they picked up. I think it's interesting because hearing how they processed the scene and everything they took, I do think that they had a consideration that there might have been something else going on here. This is a pretty detailed investigation in terms of what they're picking up. The records also did note that there was a one hitter, or a single hitter as some people might call it, in a wood case that was found. For anyone that doesn't know, that's basically something that looks like a cigarette. It's made out of metal. You load the tip of it, usually with marijuana, and it looks like you're smoking a cigarette when you're basically taking a hit. We're going to get into the medical information in a later episode, so we'll be able to determine if any marijuana was actually found in Elisa's system. Investigators also collected surveillance video from the nearby bar. Sergeant Twyla Villela also conducted recorded audio interviews on scene with Bradley and Cherone. We're going to run those with you in future episodes as well. Of course, investigators also collected and analyzed the scarf. The scarf. It's one of the main things that raises the most questions in this case. What do you guys think in terms of, you've seen photos of the room. We're talking about a pretty tight area in that hallway leading to the bedroom, the converted basement where the bedroom is. What do you think about the potential of suicide happening using that scarf in that type of area? Morph?
Just going by memory from looking through the materials we looked through, and there's a lot of them. So, but looking at that room, picturing it, one of the things we've got to look at is the height from the rafter to the floor. A lot of times when somebody takes their life in that kind of manner, they're suspended off of the ground, and they'll knock a chair out from underneath them and they'll be suspended. Here, she was apparently able to do it without elevating herself, but there are places she could have elevated herself, such as a bed. There's a little stand type of box, if I recall.
Yeah, it's like a step stool.
So there were a few things that she could have used had she did this, but at the same time, it looks like she may not have even needed to elevate herself in the way that she died.
Yeah, the beam hangs pretty low, and that's one of the things that we're going to get into with much more detailed analysis. Gray?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible to kill yourself in that situation. People in prison do similar things where they're actually low to the ground. It's just sort of the pressure on their neck that cuts off the blood supply, and then you just pass out, and then you're not alive to save yourself. The hanging from a rafter is, more typical, like you're actually off the ground. But in this case, it seems like she definitely, I mean, there was a possibility that she could do it. And we're going to go over all the details of specifically how high the beam is, how low the ceiling is, and get all the details of that in future episodes.
Of course, a big aspect to all this is also about Elisa, about her personality, her backstory, and Brad and his backstory. And do any of these things intersect? Can they help us understand this more in terms of her ability to do this to herself, or potentially his ability to be some contributing factor in this, or someone else? I mean, we've got a lot of different people that are in the house. I'm not even sure that all of that was noted in the police reports. As we're going to dig into more records, we're going to learn that there are some other people that might have been at the house that night as well.
According to an article by Susan Dew posted on citypages.com, when Judy Hunt, who's Elisa's mother, called Brad to ask what happened, he allegedly told her, quote, "My friends were over, she got mad, and I found her effing body hanging," unquote. Brad also didn't show up to Elisa's funeral, which, if this is your bride of one day, somebody that you just married, to not go to her funeral, that's...
Yeah.
I don't know what you guys think.
And that's very similar to the Jonathan Cruz case. That's one of the similarities there. The girlfriend there didn't go to the memorial services or anything like that. And you just, I mean, the love of her life. And
right.
She's not there.
There's another interesting aspect to all this. Because of the wedding, basically everything that Elisa owned then became Brad's. She was in a lease-to-own situation in the home that she had been living with. She was very close to actually owning that home. She had recently bought a new vehicle. She had a side business of taking care of animals on top of other stuff that she was doing. All of a sudden, within 12 hours of them getting married, and then 12 to 15 hours later of her not being alive anymore, all of those items now belong to Brad.
I just want to say one thing and go back to something Gray touched on earlier. This is their wedding night, and apparently they didn't sleep together and possibly consummate their marriage, so to speak. But isn't there some information, John, that he made it a point to say something about that? Yeah,
there's one moment in particular, and thankfully we're going to be able to play this audio for you guys in a later episode. But there's one point in particular where he is telling the investigator, "I hope this doesn't come back to bite me, but we actually did sleep together." And it's kind of a strange statement. He's saying, well, we just got married that day, so we actually did sleep together. It makes me wonder about some different potential things that could have happened in this, but also in terms of the timeline, I'm wondering when that happened, because from the footage that we've reviewed at Cedar Inn, it looks like she might have been upset. For some reason, she leaves at a different time than Brad and Cherone. Brad and Cherone kind of leave after her. And the way she leaves, it looks like she's huffing, kind of storming out the front door.
Right.
And we do know that at a minimum, even if you take that out and you say, well, I can't really say for sure that she was mad at that point. We know later she was, because Sharon says that they were drinking and they were arguing. We have neighbors that call in, a domestic disturbance going on. We have Brad's phone found outside. We have the gate looking like it's been kicked in. There's a lot of indicators that there was something going on that night where they were arguing with each other. So when did they have sex? I don't know. Would it have been after that type of argument? If it did, then why would Brad be sleeping upstairs and she's downstairs alone? Because wouldn't that be kind of a makeup situation? I don't think they got to that point. And that's kind of another thing. Another big question is just what happened to de-escalate that fight? Like, how did this all settle out? I didn't find that in the police narratives that we've gone through so far. So yeah, a lot of questions on this. The Practical Homicide Investigation book, which a lot of people refer to as kind of the Bible for homicide investigation in the law enforcement community. It's written by Vernon J. Geberth, and it states the rationale behind suicide can be as simple or complex as life itself. And I think that's a pretty interesting statement. especially if someone is really suffering, like if there is an undiagnosed mental disorder or something like that. It might not be that clear to other people that are looking at the situation, why that person might have ended their own life. The book also states, investigatively speaking, all death investigations should be handled as homicide cases until the facts prove differently. And that's an interesting thing, because in reading the police reports, it's very clear to me that they're going there under the presumption that Elisa had ended her own life. But seeing what they collected, how they processed the scene, like I said earlier, it does seem like someone had the thought of, we need to process all this properly in case things take a turn in this case. Do the facts really prove differently here? Can we learn enough about Elisa and Bradley to come to a better understanding of this tragedy? And ultimately, how does a family move forward from this? Elisa was a daughter, a sister, and a mother herself. Suicide frequently shows up on the list of top causes of death in the U.S., usually somewhere around 10th place in recent years. Homicide also shows up on that list, but usually somewhere around 15th, depending on what source you look at. If anyone out there is struggling with thoughts of ending their own life, please don't hesitate to find help. You can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. They are there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And one thing I thought was good was that the manner of death was undetermined.
Yeah.
Okay. And because it's undetermined, that means it's still open for interpretation. Usually if they say it's ruled a suicide, it's really tough to keep it rolling. But this is undetermined, and I think that's good news. And
it does raise an interesting question, which is, if you have a medical examiner really standing up on the report and saying something like that, hey, it's undetermined, should the investigation be closed? Because we know this investigation is effectively closed at this point. What do you guys think? If a medical examiner says cause of death undetermined, I can't rule out homicide, should the investigation ever truly close?
Yeah, I don't think the case should be closed until there's actually a determination by officials one way or the other. This is totally in limbo when it's undetermined. It seems like the police believed it was a suicide right off the bat, but the medical examiner wasn't able to determine that. So it's still open in my book.
Morph?
Yeah, I think the book has the perfect way to treat it. Treat it as a homicide until something else proves differently. So to me, they can't prove one way or another how that death occurred. It should remain open and, warrant further investigation at some point in the future if needed.
Yeah, and the Judy's mother tells me that there were some comments made from the medical examiner directly to her, basically saying, he's like, I can leave it in this status. It might stay in this status for 10 or 15 years. Basically, he is not going to change that until he has better information to push it in one way or the other. So it's interesting to hear that you have, maybe there's a different classification that cases can hit, almost like a cold case classification or something. It's interesting because we do hear about pressure from police forces to close out active investigations. Their numbers get reported to city officials and things like that. So I might understand that they don't want to leave it classified as a homicide. It might not be a homicide. It might be that the medical examiner gets some new information or some new technology comes out that's able to change their determination in a number of years. So maybe there's a different classification that can kind of put those cases in. But I'm with you guys. If an expert like that isn't able to really say, this is clearly a suicide situation, there should be some type of freeze or something that happens with the case. It just leaves it kind of open-ended for pending, developments in technology or developments with the case.
Especially in this kind of case, because you've got an argument possibly beforehand. You've got physical evidence of a fence, and if anybody sees pictures of this fence broken that we're talking
it's
about,
gone. Yeah, I mean the fence is like not even there anymore. It looks like
somebody literally threw somebody through the fence.
Yeah.
So there's other elements, and we're going to learn some more stuff as we go along. That, without revealing too much, that there might be reasons to consider that she didn't take her own life. So that's why it's important to leave that door open and not close it, to go back at some point and possibly change it if needed.
Now, did the medical examiner have some of this other information when they decided to say undetermined?
Yeah, I mean, typically a medical examiner will sometimes talk to the detectives that worked the case and consider their information. Sometimes you'll even see some of that wind up on the autopsy reports. So, like I said, we're going to go through the autopsy report in another episode. But yeah, they do get information from the detectives. I don't think they get a complete view. They probably see like some of the early stuff that happens, like, you know, the reports from the first responders and things like that. I have heard in some cases, and it's weird because, you know, police departments can operate very differently in this country from one place to the next. But I have heard in a few cases where occasionally the detectives might even be around when the autopsy is actually happening. Which I know.
It's interesting. Well, it's interesting that if he decided that it was undetermined, just based on the physical evidence, let's say looking at the scene and they weren't able to determine that it was a murder or suicide, that says a lot, right? Because that means that means even the physical evidence didn't quite convince this person based on the surroundings, maybe the same stuff we were talking about with the height of the ceiling, the beam, that kind of stuff, the scarf, all that stuff may have led the medical examiner to say, I can't determine it. And that's interesting in itself.
And I think it's important too that we all be careful in evaluating everything, because, and my understanding, and maybe we can clear this up by having a medical examiner come on to talk to us, but a medical examiner, from my understanding, is supposed to look at what's in front of them and come to their conclusion, not have the police tell them, hey, this is how she died. That's the medical examiner's opinion of how she died. And I've seen certain cases where the police have swayed them to change things, but is that really how it's supposed to happen? And maybe reaching out to a medical examiner would clear that up for us to see what the process is. It's
one of my frustrations early on in getting into true crime is when I started reviewing autopsy reports and seeing that it is a highly scientific analysis of what the body went through and the state that the body is in when they're reviewing it. But all of a sudden the determinations include these other things that are pretty much investigative information. That's outside of the autopsy room. So yeah, I'm with you. In terms of pure science, you would think they should remain independent, that one shouldn't influence the other. But at least the practicality of it, from what I've seen, is the investigators and their notes in particular sometimes do influence the outcome.
Well, I think you kind of need that too, because you might have something that could be explained in two different ways, but when you have information that highly suggests that it's a murder over a suicide, then maybe that's included in what the medical examiner, his findings are, because they have to determine, right? Suicide, undetermined, or murder, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but so also keep in mind, they have a representative show up on the site. And that's one of the things, that's why I threw it in the notes here. You know, essentially the medical examiner's office has someone that goes out to the location and actually processes the body from there. So their investigative effort or their scientific analysis of what's going on should start at the actual location. And I've heard of other cases where it's like, you know, the coroner never came out and bizarre things like that. I was wondering if we might have that type of situation here. But it was very clear in the police notes the medical examiner does take the body from there. So, yeah. A lot of interesting things. We are also looking for your feedback on this. Gray, we're going to be doing a live stream, I hear?
Yes, on December 18th at 9 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. Pacific, we will be doing a live stream on my channel, Gray Hughes Investigates, and make sure you hit the subscribe and hit the notification bell.
Yep. And I'm just going to throw the Central Time out there because this is taking place in Minneapolis. So that will be 8 p.m. Central. So anyone that's local wants to share information with us about this case in particular, if you might have some information you want to call in, you can try to do it there. But remember, you can also find all the information and links that you need for any specific episode of Three Men all in one place at our website, www.threemenandamystery.com. And that's with the number 3. And if you have information to help shine the light of truth on this case, please send it in. You'll also find a Patreon link there so you can help support our efforts and get some cool perks by joining.
If you have any feedback, corrections, or new details about this case, you can send them to us via email at 3men@threemenandamystery.com. Those are with the number 3s in there. Or you can reach out to us on Twitter at 3menandamystery, or find us on Facebook. And if you're looking for another true crime podcast to listen to while you're waiting for the next episode of 3 Men and a Mystery to come out, consider Let's Taco About True Crime. Here's a sample.
Hey, you know what? Just like you, I love true crime. I love it so much, I started a podcast called Once Upon a Crime. On that podcast, I give you a new true crime case every week in a storytelling style. In my new podcast, I've decided to give you a little taste of something different. Because you see, I love to discuss true crime with others, and I don't get a chance to do that often enough. I started to feel like I was missing out on the conversation. Now, I know you have plenty of true crime podcasts to choose from, many in a discussion style format. I mean, you can take your true crime with a beer, or a martini, or a glass of wine. But until now, you weren't offered true crime and tacos. And really, what could be a better combination? But seriously, I started this new podcast because I want to talk about the things you want to talk about. Each episode, I and a featured guest host will share, review, and discuss everything true crime. We'll talk about the newest true crime documentaries and series, breaking true crime news, the latest buzz about true crime and social media, and even trending news and gossip about your favorite true crime podcasts. You never know who might join us. Guest hosts might include your favorite podcasters, investigators, journalists, documentarians, even celebrity guests. The only prerequisite is that they love true crime and tacos. So take a seat at the table, grab a taco and your favorite hot sauce, and join me, your host, Esther Ludlow, and let's talk about true crime. You can find Let's Talk About True Crime wherever you listen to podcasts. That's TACO about true crime. Just look for the cute taco logo.
Three Men and a Mystery is produced by John Lorden, Mike Morford, and Gray Hughes.
Please rate us on the podcasting platform that you found us on and help us grow by telling your friends and family about us.
On the next episode, we'll learn more about Elisa and Bradley's backstories, how they met, and what they did on her final day. I'm John Lorden.
This is Mike Morford.
And I'm Gray Hughes.
And we are 3 Men and a Mystery.